Welcome to ILTV's Insider. I'm Aaron Porras, and today we're taking another close look at Israel's political climate ahead of the fourth serial election in 2 years' time. Recent polls giving the top 5 spots to Prime Minister Netanyahu's Likud party with 28 seats, followed by Yesh Atid with 20, Yamina with 11, New Hope with 10, and the Joint Arab List with 8. But as for how these parties will align into a potential government is still anyone's guess. All we can do is speculate for now that the top Prime Minister candidates seem to be Netanyahu, Bennett, and Lapid. And joining us to discuss is former Meretz Knesset member Mossi and Jeremy Saltan, political strategist, director of English operations, and Knesset candidate for Yamina. Thank you both so much for being with us today.
For sure.
All right. Now, Mossi, I'm actually going to start with you because Meretz and Labour have now just come out supporting Lapid from Yesh Atid for Prime Minister. What makes Lapid the best choice?
Among the 2 or even 4 leaders of the 4 leading parties, Lapid is the only one that is pretty close to us. He's liberal. I would not say that he's leftist, but at least center, but while the others are right-wingers and even, I would say, tough right-wingers. And of course, Netanyahu, that is maybe not as right-wing as Sar and Bennett, but he's corrupted, and of course, these elections are about sending Netanyahu home or not. So if I take all this into consideration, Lapid is the only one, and I want to say more than that. Lapid, in his 7 years in the Knesset, or 8 years now, showed again and again he's a person who wants to study, he's a person who cares about Israel, he's a person who is really interesting in the Israeli citizens. If you told me 8 years ago that I would support Lapid, I could tell you that it will never happen, but I see that everything is different now.
All right, well, Jeremy, Naftali Bennett, the leader of the Yamina party, has stated that he has ruled out any sort of coalition under Lapid, but he hasn't exactly eliminated the possibility of sitting with Lapid. Why is that?
Well, it's a pretty simple situation we have here. It's a 3-man race, and I understand that both Lapid and Netanyahu prefer to explain this as a binary either-or situation. But as we've seen within all of the polls, the 3 parties that are consistently in double digits, as you mentioned. That's, of course, on the more lower side. In other channels, we're higher, depending on the poll. But the situation is that after 3 elections of having this be a race between Bibi and the anti-Bibi bloc, we've not had a normal government. And if you're looking at having stability and having a government that can actually be formed after these elections, the only party that is not being boycotted by anybody, who has the ability to both pick under, parties that are in the anti-Bibi bloc, as well as go into the Bibi bloc and be able to form a joint coalition, Naftali Bennett is the only person under the Yamina platform that can actually do that.
Mossi, do you think that Lapid and the Yesh Atid platform can galvanize enough votes across the political spectrum to form a coalition? Because now you're talking about how it was fairly obvious for Meretz and Labour to support Lapid, but what about the other votes necessary? You need to get to 61. Who are you getting it from?
Yes, of course, the answer is yes. And Bennett and Sar have to understand that they have very little support, like in the last polls, 8%, something like that. You cannot be prime minister if you have only 8% of the population supporting you. So they must understand that if they want to have a new prime minister, if they support Netanyahu, okay, I can understand that. But they say they don't support. So that's why less and less people believe them, because people see that they actually cheat. They want to cooperate with Netanyahu like they cooperated in the past. And if they don't say before the elections that they would sit with Lapid in the same coalition, I think that they will not even get the 8 or 9% that they get right now in the polls.
Jeremy?
Look, you want to look at the suitability polls for prime minister, or do you want to look at the actual mandate poll? I understand that Meretz, where in a majority of polls are under the threshold, they'd prefer to look at percentages as opposed to seats in government. Of course, when it comes to choosing the prime minister, it's a three-step process. There are the seats we get, there are the recommendations in the president's residence, and then there's an overall vote when it comes to the Knesset, who needs to have confidence within the new government that's being presented. Now, however it is that you want to slice it, it's very simple. Over 80 seats in every poll are from the right-wing parties. And again, after 3 elections of Gantz not being able to go ahead and form a coalition, and let's remember, Gantz is even to the right of where Lapid sits today, what makes anyone think that Lapid is going to be able to go ahead and form a government? Now, Lapid can be a coalition partner in a government under Bennett, but what Meretz and Labor are doing here is they're trying to help create this facade that this is, again, a race between Bibi and Lapid. Once again, this is a 3-person race. The situation is not such a big gap, especially when you're looking at the number of undecided voters. Majority of the analysts and a majority of the stations understand this is a derby within the right-wing camp. There is no path to 61. And for Mossi to try to pretend there is, all he can do ahead is say, oh, well, they're somehow in Bennett's pocket. Well, listen, if Mossi Rad says that we're in Bibi's pocket, if Bibi says we're in Lapid's pocket, I think the public out there understands that there are a bunch of people that are afraid of someone, and that is Yamina.
Mossi, how do you respond? Do you think that it's fair to say that Lapid with Yamina and Benjamin Netanyahu with the Likud are afraid of Bennett?
No, I don't think that it's fair, but I think the question is a little bit different. My friend, you cannot say that the elections are, okay, you have 80 representatives for the right wing. Yes, I agree, right wing is majority. But you have to decide whether the elections are about right or left. And then if this is the situation, I should not support you because you are far right. And or the elections are Netanyahu, yes or no. And then if the elections are Netanyahu, yes or no, then we can cooperate. But then if this is the question, then you should let Lapid, not only the leader of the largest party, but the leader that would get support not only from his party, but from Labour Party, from Meretz, I don't know, maybe from other parties. So we'll have way more support than Bennett and
Again, Mossi, I'm looking at your support, and like I said, in a majority of polls, you're looking on the outside of the next Knesset, your party. And that's just the reality. But that's the reality of it. You want to call me far right when in the beginning of the interview you wanted to sit in the same coalition with me. The problem with Meretz that gives legitimacy to the ICC decision, there's a reason of why it is that you guys do not have support and we do. And yes, what you're trying to do here is say that the entire election campaign is on Bibi.
Okay.
I'll tell you, look, Mossi, I don't know what you've seen during this campaign, but when I'm outside and I'm talking to voters, they're not telling me about what matters to them over who's going to be the prime minister. What they're asking is, how do I get my job back? How do I go out and live my life and feel safe? There are so many people, they're stuck outside the country. They can't even get back in because of the crazy chaos that we see coming from this government. So again, you want to pretend that it's about this, that. That's not what it's about. This election is about who cares about the Israeli people, who are putting plans on the table to be able to go ahead and deal with the challenges that we have here. This isn't some race for class president. Okay, this isn't a popularity contest. This is about people's lives. And because people care about their livelihood and they care about seeing actual concrete policies, that is the reason why we are doing well now in the polls. And that's also the reason why I expect a lot of undecided will go ahead and jump on our party between now and Election Day.
With that in mind, Mossi, I'm going to turn to you, but with a new question. What do you think the primary issues that people are voting on is? Because, up until very recently, people probably would have said the coronavirus, but that's already starting to become more or less a thing of the past as the vaccine program continues to progress. So as we get closer to elections, what is most important to voters? Yamina is saying now that it's jobs and the economy.
Jobs and economy are most important for voters, but it doesn't say that they think about jobs and economy while they go out to vote. When you ask people, you not necessarily get the question, the answer that is the real answer. Now, of course, people care about jobs and care about the economic situation more than ever, and this is most important for them. But do you really believe that the, say, 8% who say in the polls that they are going to vote to the joint list, they vote because of jobs? No, they vote because they are Arabs. Do you really believe that about 15% who say that they are going to vote for the Orthodox are voting for them because they think they know how to care for jobs? No, they vote for them because they are ultra-religious, and so on and so on. So what I'm saying is that the main reason for voting is identity.
Well, so if that's the case, then I think we're touching on something that most voters here in Israel are very afraid of, and that is that the divisions, or rather the ratio of the division in the vote, is unmoving, and we're doomed to fifth elections. Is that more or less what you're saying? Would you agree with that?
That might happen, but we are going to face some small changes if we compare to the number of third election. Yes, very small changes, but those small changes might be the difference between a government and not having a government. And I must say that as I see the third elections, we had a decision in the third elections, but we had a problem that the people, the representatives of the center left, did not want to govern and actually turned their support to the Likud, to the right wing. But we did have a decision of the voters. The voters wanted to say a center-left government. We had 62, or actually not really 62, but more members of Knesset who recommended on Mr. Gantz to be the prime minister, but instead of being the prime minister, he decided to let Netanyahu be the prime minister. He believed that Netanyahu would not cheat him like Netanyahu cheated Bennett and Lieberman and Barkat and Gantz and everybody. And again, we saw that Netanyahu is a person that we cannot trust. By the way, I'm not sure that Bennett knows better than Netanyahu how to create jobs. I don't know. But again, Bennett is against Netanyahu, so we are in the same, we will say more or less in the same attitude to Netanyahu. And this is the question about identity, perception about Netanyahu, and in some places there are other important things. But when people go to vote, yes, they think about jobs, but they don't think if they vote for Bennett or Horowitz or Netanyahu or Saar, there is a difference regarding the jobs. And otherwise, you could have seen if the last elections were, say, about another thing, and those are about vote, about jobs, you could think that, okay, many people will vote different than the previous time. It's not going to happen because jobs are not a criteria when people vote. This is very important. People think about that. If I can help Israelis, this is the first thing that I want to help Israelis, but it doesn't. It is not a reason for voting.
You know, I understand that there are a lot of Meretz leaders that are sitting in their ivory tower, and maybe they don't see the million Israelis that are right now, on unemployment. Maybe they don't see the fact that even once we get past that point where people can go back to work, there are going to be 400,000 jobs that are missing, and someone needs to put out a plan to be able to go ahead and give those people the ability to make bread again. And I'll tell you something, what I have seen, at least by talking to the voters that I've met, is that they do want to talk about the economy, and they plan on voting about the economy. It's true. In past elections, they didn't do that. There's a reason why they're doing it this time, and that's because they're out of work. And it's worth going down out of the ivory tower to meet some people and talk to them about it. Look, there's a big difference between us and what the left and even Netanyahu wants to do. We want to create the 400,000 jobs by growing the private sector at the expense of freezing the public sector in order to be able to increase the private sector. We're talking about cutting the corporate tax from 23% to 15%, depending on your tax bracket. We want to lower taxes for income tax between 15 to 20%. We're looking at cutting regulations. We're looking at having a situation where we create the conditions to be able to allow people to start a business, or if they have a business that has been able to persevere and last after Corona, that they'll be able to restart it and get to an easier level to be able to make bread. That's what people care about. And, we can talk all we want about all these other things, but that's what the election is about.
The people don't vote for you because they don't trust you. There are 92% of
You're the one not
don't
passing the
vote for you.
threshold, so they obviously don't trust you, Mossi.
And just to remind everybody, I believe almost all the Israelis remember that, your party was in the cabinet until a few months ago. So
our party was. Mossi, I don't need to fact check you. I don't need to fact check you here. We left the government 11 months ago. We left the government 11 months ago. Of course, a lot of people who voted for your party, whether it was Labor or Gesher, saw people go, those votes into the government. I know that wasn't your fault. I know that wasn't your fault. But don't go ahead and say that we're the ones that have been in this government. This has been the most disastrous government that we've probably had, definitely in recent history, but perhaps within the state of Israel in its entire history. And what I can tell you is that the true opposition to this government, and everybody knows it over the last 11 months, was Naftali Bennett. He was the one who was going out and talking about specific plans when it came to the corona, when it came to the economy. We didn't hear you. We didn't hear you. That's the truth. There's a reason why we're in double digits and you're not passing the threshold.
See?
You are so funny. If there is somebody in this state who believes that Bennett was the opposition to this government, he didn't show up to one vote in the Knesset. He didn't show up to one demonstration. It's a comedy here.
Mossi, you can laugh your way to the unemployment line.
Well, hold on.
Maybe you'll learn something.
Well, hold on, Jeremy. Let's address what Mossi is saying. He said that Bennett, in the last 11 months since being in the opposition, leaving the government and joining the opposition, has not had a real showing in the government from the position of the opposition.
Well, what Naftali Bennett has done is he's been on the ground. He's been in the field talking to business owners, seeing what it is.
But you're describing a campaign trail and less activism from the opposition.
No. But let me explain to you what the truth is when it comes to the opposition. Showing up and then screaming from the Knesset podium and feeling really good about yourself and patting on yourself when you voted in a landslide that was 60 to 20 in the Knesset is not the same as being there in the field and talking to people, trying to understand what can be done differently and building a real alternative to the government and knowing to criticize and provide solutions, concrete solutions in terms of how to go ahead and do things differently. When you're in opposition, like you are in Meretz, we just go up to the podium and you say, Bibi's bad and Bibi's corrupt and we need to switch him, but they don't provide any solution in terms of what they would do differently, then I don't think, a majority of people look at that and take it seriously. Look, You want to go back to reality? Let's go back to reality, Mossi. You're not passing the threshold in most polls. In every single poll, we're in double digits. The public is not with you anymore. This is not 1992.
Mossi?
Your 12 seats are gone.
Mossi?
Okay, of course, Eli, yes.
Well, I mean, the poll. Well, that is the poll.
How
Well, that
is
is the poll.
You know, if I'm lying,
can
then
you
tell me what I'm
speak
lying
1
about.
minute without this stupid person interrupting me all the time? Please, okay, I agree to leave. But he speak and speak and speak and speak and not let speak.
Speak.
In all the last public opinion polls, we passed the threshold. One. Second, I don't like the fact that my colleague here is inciting against democracy and saying that the Knesset is not important. And they were elected to the Knesset, and he says that it is not important to come to the Knesset, it is not important to vote, it is not important to talk in the Knesset. So why do you want to the Knesset? Go, you say that you are on opposition underground, be underground, be in the exile, be whatever you want to be. We are going to have now elections to the Knesset. And if you think the Knesset is not important, but if you think that it's stupid to speak in the Knesset, so go to the street.
You know,
you create jobs in the street.
Mossi.
Let me speak. You spoke 30 minutes.
Sure.
You spoke 30 minutes. Let me speak 2 minutes, and that's all. I go down the show and speak. You can speak another 2 hours. This incitement against democracy, this is the real problem. This again and again and again to say that the Knesset is not important, democracy is not important. They will create jobs. Who believe in that? You were in the government in the last 8 years. Few months, you left the government for a few months, and then you tell us theories about jobs that you create. Do you think that we are so stupid to believe in that? Only a stupid person can believe in that. How can you create jobs? You were in the government. You had economic ministries. You had economic ministries. You tell us stories that you will create jobs. So, okay, I understand. I will create 1 million jobs, not 400,000 jobs. And you don't know to create 1 million. You know only 400,000.
All right, with that, unfortunately, I have to end this conversation here. I really regret having to do that, but thank you again, Mossi Raz, former Knesset member from Meretz, and Jeremy Saltan, candidate for Yamina Party, for joining us. I'm Aaron Porras, and please tune in next time on Insider for more on everything Israel. If there's a topic that you'd like us to cover next, let us know about it in the comment sections online. And finally, for more news from Israel, follow ILTV on Facebook and Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube and ILTV.tv channels. Thank you so much. Be well, and see you soon.